Hello, my name is Jacob Andrews, and in this presentation I will present the findings from a Delphi study conducted at the University of Nottingham, where we have been exploring clinical perspectives on using remote measurement technology in epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, and depression. This study formed part of the Radar CNS project, which was funded by the Innovative Medicines Initiative with funding from Horizon 2020. Remote measurement technology consists of smartphone apps and wearables that record a variety of types of data, including GPS, mobile phone usage, heart rate, number of Bluetooth connections, and activity, among others. A use case states how a form of technology could be used in clinical practice. Use cases describe the context, the beneficiary, and the expected benefit. Many potentially useful technologies are not in fact implemented in healthcare because their use case is not clearly defined. However, a clear use case is essential for determining outcomes to be used in trials evaluating effectiveness, for obtaining regulatory approvals from the MHRA and other regulatory bodies, and for explaining the benefits of the technology to potential payers. Now, symptom monitoring in epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, and depression is problematic. In epilepsy, seizure diaries are known to be inaccurate. In depression, measures ask patients to evaluate their condition over a time period, which is known to be distorted by current mindset. And in MS, the condition may progress without patients being aware of changes, or conversely, patients may be aware of changes without being able to evidence these in traditional outcome measures in the clinic. Remote measurement technology may offer improvements in symptom measurement in these conditions. We worked with clinicians, researchers, and patients to develop 13 use cases for remote measurement technology in these conditions. We undertook a study to evaluate this set of use cases with an external expert panel of clinicians working across Europe in the care of patients with epilepsy, MS, or depression. I'll now provide some examples of the use cases we developed. So the Radar CNS RMT system could help inform treatment review in depression. This application of RMT might be used where patients are living in the community but have moderate to severe symptoms of depression or have regular relapses. RMT data provides a very granular view of a patient's condition, and radar can be used to monitor patient condition and treatment response, as well as potentially to record side effects of treatment. As a result of this data collection, treatment can be modified if necessary based on these data. In this example, we're showing how RMT could be used to alert a carer when a patient with epilepsy has a seizure. The RMT, in this case a smartwatch, detects patterns of movement during and leading up to seizures using accelerometers in the device, and then sends an alert to the patient and their carer. If the patient is able, they can move themselves to a safe position, and the carer can come to assist. This use case could result in a reduction in injury from seizures with a motor component, and the risk of sudden death in epilepsy, SUDEP, is also reduced as the carer can ensure that the patient is breathing. This use case is already possible for certain types of seizure when patients are at rest, but in the RADAR project, we're also exploring if it's possible to detect seizures when patients are active and also in multiple different types of seizure. This slide shows how RMT could be used to detect the silent progression of multiple sclerosis for patients living at home with an existing diagnosis. Sometimes a patient's condition can develop or change in ways which cannot be detected by traditional outcome measures. However, through its wide array of data streams and the granularity of the data that it collects, the Radar CNS RMT system may allow the detection and monitoring of this otherwise silent progression of the disease. Also, sometimes patients notice that something about their condition is changing, but this change is not picked up on regular clinic tests. With radar, patients have a better chance of being able to objectively demonstrate to their clinician or the clinical team that a change has taken place, given their data. This might help to inform changes to treatment or identify where patients might need closer monitoring. This slide presents the full set of 13 use cases we've developed. Please feel free to pause the video to read these through. The study we're reporting on in this work was a Delphi study, which we used to validate the use cases we developed with an external experts panel of clinicians. We wanted to know if clinicians external to the project saw benefits to the use of remote measurement technology in these use cases. So to do so, we conducted a 3-round process with 2 identical survey rounds, followed by a follow-up interview round. All participants completing round 1 received a summary of all participants' responses, and also some comments from the Patient Advisory Board on these responses. Respondents then continued to respond to round 2. With the follow-up interviews afterwards, this was a mixed methods sequential explanatory design study. We used a stability analysis to determine whether views were changing between rounds, and we analysed the survey data for consensus between respondents. With the qualitative interview data, we used template analysis and triangulation to analyse this alongside the quantitative data. Participants were clinicians working in the care of people with epilepsy, MS or depression in the UK, Germany, Spain, Denmark, Holland and Italy, in a variety of clinical roles. 6 participants dropped out between the first and second survey rounds, and 9 participants consented to complete interviews. There were fewer respondents completing both survey rounds in multiple sclerosis compared to epilepsy or depression. We recruited through the project network, i.e. external colleagues of the clinical members of the research team, and by inviting people from professional networks of clinicians across Europe. The survey was formed of 2 parts. The first part dealt with condition-specific questions, where participants only answered questions relevant to their specialism, and the second part contained more general questions about the use of RMT in clinical practice, which all participants answered. Now, in the first part, we asked the same 7 questions about each use case to find out what clinicians thought its value would be. These asked whether the use case was practical, whether it would enable, enhance, facilitate or catalyse care, and whether it would be overall beneficial for patients and for clinical teams. Further survey questions in part 2 covered areas highlighted by our previous work as in need of further exploration, including time to review patient data, frequency of data collection, technical support and reimbursement. We used a Likert-style response scale with consensus set a priori at 70%. Follow-up interviews explored reasonings for responses given and explored regional factors. Now, the full results from all of our analyses will be made available in a forthcoming journal article. However, on this slide, we have a high-level summary of the condition-specific results from part 1 of the survey. All use cases in epilepsy were supported as useful, valid and novel, except for using RMT to rate the risk of a seizure, which clinicians thought could cause medico-legal issues. None of the MS use cases reached consensus on any item, although our results here may not be robust because very few MS participants continued to complete round 2. Qualitative findings suggested that the value of detecting silent progression in MS would depend on the availability of treatments for symptoms detected, while detecting depression in MS was considered potentially valuable, though at risk of confounding from symptoms of MS. Use cases 1 to 3 for depression were considered useful, valid and novel, while it was thought that physical health conditions may confound the analyses used to detect depression in use case 4. Clinicians also critiqued the use case 5, suggesting that informal carers may not have the required skills to assist patients in depressive relapse. Now, other results from our study showed that RMT would need more staff time and financial resource than the status quo to implement, although there was a general view that this would be worthwhile. There was also a suggestion that RMT could offer benefits in other conditions, including bipolar disorder. There were mixed views on how frequently data should be collected based on stage of disease and phase of treatment. And we drew the distinction in our study between actively collected data, where the patient inputs their responses to certain questions, for example with mood questionnaires, and passively collected data, which records automatically, for example in step counts and GPS location records. And our participants indicated that passive data may be more useful than active data because it required less attention from the patient, who might forget or be too busy to complete questionnaires, impeding adherence. Passive data was also seen to be less subjective. It may be that using passive measures as proxies or as new digital biomarkers could be useful, according to these comments. Region-specific comments highlighted the difference between countries with national health services, such as the UK, Holland and Spain, compared to countries with more insurer-led healthcare models or mixed healthcare models, such as Germany. In general, our conclusions are that utility of the technology depends on being able to take action in response to the data collected. RMT may introduce medico-legal consequences, for example, by scoring risk of seizures and epilepsy. Biomarkers from passive data may reduce the requirement for active data entry, and this may improve adherence. However, these biomarkers may be confounded by physical effects of comorbid conditions. The implementation of RMT will have different implications in different healthcare service models, which vary by country. And the Delphi method, with multiple survey rounds and follow-up interviews, is a useful method for eliciting and further exploring expert opinions. However, we do have some reflections on the use of the Delphi method. Follow-up interviews, we found, were extremely informative and allowed useful triangulation of data. Dropout between rounds is to be avoided, and we think that the length of the survey may contribute to dropout. So we had 117 questions in our survey, which may have been a lot for busy clinicians to repeat the survey. Recruiting across multiple countries requires researcher time and resource in each country, and we're very grateful to the research teams that helped us in other countries. Focusing on a single clinical area might actually be more fruitful than exploring multiple conditions at once. And we think it's important to allow consensus to be reached or lost in the second round of the survey. We found that actually in the literature, a lot of authors suggested that where they had reached consensus in the first round, they eliminated those questions in round 2. And we thought it was important to include that to show where consensus is lost. Now, Ian Belton and colleagues have provided a very useful guide to the Delphi method, which we referred to and found very useful. Here are our references. Please do pause the presentation to have a look at these if you're interested. We'd like to thank you for your time to listen to this presentation. Please do reach out if you have any questions.